Sarah, can we bring up the lights where they were before? It's very, yeah. And then maybe when Sarah dances, we can bring the lights better. I want to start. What's causing me is, you told me to get close, it's making me do that. What do you think? Better?
That's better.
All right.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thank yous.
There you go.
Thanks to Jane. You guys, she's incredible. Thanks to the state of Ohio. In my early years, I came out here quite a bit, and the state was so hospitable to a young choreographer with different ideas. It wasn't just the modern scene that was hospitable. I did a piece here at Ballet Met. They stretched, I stretched. It was quite an amazing period. I'm ever grateful for that opportunity, and it seems amazing to be back here in their space. And even just today, I felt such hospitality and openness from the people who chose to come and dance this morning. Thank you for that as well. I thought, maybe it's because I'm back here at Ballet Met and just seeing so many wonderful young people, it sort of set me back a little bit. And I'm not sure people know this, but I was raised first as a classical dancer. And in fact, when I was 14, I got to perform for President Kennedy. That summer, Mrs. Kennedy had a series of concerts by young people out on the mall. And I was part of a group of, I was the youngest in the dance group, and then there was a whole orchestra of high school kids, and we performed and met the president. And it was you can imagine, a profound experience for a 14-year-old. And then I went home to Milwaukee, where I was living, and the civil rights movement was really beginning. Milwaukee's one of the most segregated cities in the country, and I grew up in a very political family, so I was expected to participate in the protests. And the reason I raise this is because I'm from Baltimore now, and it just seems so like a kind of symmetry that I would be here today in a ballet school and performance space, while at home, my city, is the people are taking to the streets over this very significant situation we find ourselves in this country. So a lot of what I want to talk about is, well, at that time, I didn't understand how I could be a dancer and be involved in the world. I really didn't. And so there's a whole period where you see me swinging between trying to be involved and trying to be in dance, not figuring out how to do both. And what you'll hear today is some of the stories that helped me begin to find my way into being an artist citizen, a person who I hope is open to influence, but also can affect others with their influence. And if I can impart anything to you today, it's the fact that your deep, deep knowledge as artists is deeply needed in the world. And even if the world doesn't pay you back and doesn't tell you you're wonderful for doing it, you have so much to give. And I hope you'll agree with me by the time I'm done talking. There are a lot of ways to begin a talk like this, and again, I'm going to take you back to the way I used to talk about it. I haven't done this for quite a while, but something about the way the trees are moving this morning when I looked out my window in the hotel. But this is the thing. I think there was a time when people danced and the crops grew. I think people danced and that's how they healed their children. I think people danced to make the sun come up, because in fact when they danced, the sun did come up. I met a woman, a Native American woman on the East Coast of the United States. She does that every day. She's from a tribe, the name of the tribe is actually Greet the Dawn. And she does her dance every morning. And it's amazing because the sun comes up. And one day she told me, the sun was so beautiful, she had to change the dance. And I thought, yeah, that's how it works. That's exactly how it works. The artist in her started to change, make the sun come up differently. I really think that we dance to understand the things we cannot comprehend in any other way, and that we can't really understand the mysteries without our bodies. So the fact that in most Western life, we are so separated from our bodies, despite how much dancing you see on the ads on television these days, it's a thing, isn't it? And yet, I think everybody in this room knows that I'm speaking a certain kind of truth. So when I thought about this and felt the power of that, I was surprised in my dance training how kind of strange it was that some of the most powerful aspects of what we did started to get pulled away from my training. By the time I was getting really serious about it and studying in college and beyond, the idea that you might want to be involved in healing and dance, well, then people would say, well, go be a dance therapist. Right? Or the fact that I was interested in the fact that I knew I learned better when I danced, so I wasn't dancing part of school. People say, oh, you want to be a dance educator? Go do that. And even at some of my own spiritual yearnings, people would say, well, they do liturgical dance down in the church down over there, go do that. And what was left for me, the person training to become a professional dancer in the United States, got smaller and smaller. I mean, it got bigger and bigger. I mean, my legs were extending, good things were happening in my body, things like that. Of course, I loved the training, loved it. But when my mother got sick and eventually died rather rapidly of cancer, and in that way in which people make dances about things they don't understand, and I went to try to make this dance about her, that's when I realized that there was nothing in my toolbox to help me contend with everything that was going on in my life, including how would I even make a dance about my mother's death. So I noticed that if I wanted to think about those things, I could bring them into rehearsal, but I kind of had to go traveling to get the information. I believed that it was fine for people to train to become dance therapists, and some of you very well might choose to do that. But I wanted to keep the walls between dance therapy and dance and rehearsal. I wanted to keep them kind of permeable, and we talked about that today. Right? We talked about how do you build an environment in a rehearsal room so everybody does their best. I wouldn't call that therapy, but I would call that thinking hard about how people feel and what is the relationship between their feelings and their capacity to make art. And I would say as a choreographer, it's one of my responsibilities. I didn't learn that in choreography school. I learned that somewhere else. And so how to bring these things that seem far away into the studio was interesting to me. So I found a bunch of old people to teach. It was hard. I'm not going to tell those stories today. But what I noticed is that in order to do what I wanted to do, which was have a dance company, have a tour, and continue to work with old people, put some old people in the company, all of that, I found that I couldn't do it in one piece. I was kind of like teaching over here and running around over here. I started to say, well, I'm not fragmented. The world is fragmented. If I'm going to be my whole self as an artist, it's going to look like I'm fragmented. But I'm not. I'm the one who's whole. It's me chasing this fragmented world. So I'd like to, I don't know how much that's changed now at this older age of mine and your youth, but I have a couple more ways to think about it, which I'd like to share with you, and then we'll get into some dancing. When I was a very little girl, we lived in Los Angeles. I don't know how many of you moved a lot in your life, but we moved a ton when I was little. And what was interesting about that is you're able to have markers. I know, for example, the story I'm going to tell you happened when we lived in Los Angeles, and therefore I could not have been older than 4.5 because we moved when I was 4.5. Otherwise, I have no idea. It would, I could have been any age. I had terrible nightmares, terrible. And the nightmare was that the dots were coming to get me. Like I pictured the room like just swarming with dots, and they were like bees, just swarming, and they would come at me, and my poor mother, I'd holler, and then they'd run into the room, and they'd soothe me, and she'd hold me, and then the dots would go away. The dots stopped when we left Los Angeles, except that this is the irony, I see the world in dots now. That's how I see the world. Maybe I've been influenced by the geneticists and the physicists who I've worked with in the last decade, because I've done a lot of work with scientists. It's a very interesting area. We're all interested. The art science thing right now is huge. Keep that on your radar, you guys. It's a very lively universe out there for you. You know, the geneticists are busy breaking everything down into tiny bits of DNA, and the physicists are busy breaking everything down into these little particles. And they know that it's not the meaning. They know they're not getting to the meaning of life. They acknowledge the meaning is going to come from us. But they know they're very, very busy. And I kind of like it too. I kind of like breaking things down into small pieces. We did that today in class. Little tiny, creative, little processes, little tools, little bits that you can add up in your own way. But here's the thing. When I was praised because I put old people on stage and people said, wow, that was really original. You know what? I just connected some dots. I saw my mother's death. I saw a need for the old people to be in it because I needed them to welcome her as angels. I saw, oh wow, dancing for old people, something starts to happen in their bodies. You think old people have been dancing before I started doing that with them? Like for thousands of years. Thousands. We just forgot. We just forgot. So I took the dots and I made a little border around them and I said, see, old people can dance too. But the world's just dots. And we can choose the borders. Let me give you an example. I spent 5 years being part of something called the Lerman Orchestra Forum. I'm going to talk about orchestras. Don't go to sleep. It's really important. And it has a lot to do with our world too. Especially those of you who are living in the classical end of the spectrum. The Lerman Orchestra Forum brought 20 of the best orchestras in the country together for 5 years to try to figure out how to save them. Because if you haven't noticed, the orchestras are going out of business. So are the dance companies, so are the ballet companies, some of the universities. So somebody got up at one of those meetings and they said, you know, the orchestras might be going out of business, but there's always going to be music. It's not music that's going away. It's maybe a particular way to organize a group of people to play a particular kind of music in a particular way. That might go away. But not music. See what I mean? The borders. The dots are there. The essence of music is there. It's not going away. Same with dance. It's not going anywhere. Dance is here. It's us. It's us. The borders we drew around it for, the period I was a choreographer, having a company, touring, all that, blah, 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 that might go away. But you have the power to reconnect the dots in the ways you see fit and to make a world. I hope you get excited about that. I know it's a little bit scary, but it's really kind of wonderful out there. Like I said, I was just a pioneer trying to figure out how to get old people to be angels. And my whole life changed when I did that. So when I went into the senior center and started to do this, here's what happened to me. People said something like this, because it coincided with my company starting to tour, including places like the Kennedy Center, Lincoln Center, places like that. They said, Liz, the work that your company does at the Kennedy Center, that is up here. And the work that you're doing in the senior center with the old people or the stuff you're doing at Children's Hospital, that's down here. This is good. This is art. I don't know. Call this what you want. We have a word for it now. We call it outreach. We didn't have that word then. I really like that word for all kinds of reasons. You know what? But some people said this. They said, wait a minute. Actually, the work you're doing in the senior center, that's where the power is. That's what's important. Why are you still performing? I mean, why even have spaces like this? It's old, it's white, it's elitist, it's European. Come on, give it up. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. Would you want to choose? Would you want to choose? Why? I didn't. I love them both, so I did this. Watch. Really easy to do with my hands. I said, wait a minute. Why choose? I I love what happens in these worlds. And by the way, if you make it a circle, they are next door to each other. So I could take the long walk back and forth between, say, Children's Hospital, where I was in residence for 5 years, and the studio, where I could put them together and see what their relationships were. This got me really interested, because I started to notice we don't do that just with, okay, work in the community and work on stage. We do it about everything. You're either an individual genius, or you're part of a collective. Let's make the collectives more important. We'll keep the genius by itself down here. Nurture rigor. I can think of a million things where we set up this false choice. And here's the thing, you guys, and I think this has some, perhaps, value for you. In this world, there's only one right answer. There's only one, this one. In this world, there are a lot of right answers. It's amazing what happens. In this world, if I want to make a distinction between ballet and modern, the only way I can make the distinction is to put one down, literally. I can't make the distinction without saying one is better than the other. That's why it hurts so much. In this world, I can make distinctions without rancor. I can say sometimes classicism is what I want, sometimes contemporary is what I want, sometimes, and I can live among those things. Isn't that thrilling? In this world, this is the cutting edge. I don't know what's going on down here. In this world, for those of you that end up teaching, you'll see that you're going to have cutting edge work happening in your third grade classroom. You don't have to go to the Brooklyn Academy of Music to do cutting edge work. You don't. You can do it next door. Not in this world. You can here. Do you want to just practice this with me? Put your hands up like this, because this is the one thing you take home with you today. Okay, so it's not this. Go ahead, just feel it out. That's what a lot of people do. They just say, okay, we'll just flip it. Doesn't work. Do this. And just feel, and then if you make it a really big embrace, yeah, and then if you make a little circle, they're right next door. Thank you. That was good. You did very good. All right. So, is this making any sense to you? Yeah, I hope so. Okay. So here's a serious one in this world, process product. You've probably heard this a million times, and if you haven't, I promise you will. Process is more important, no, the product is more important. Who was in class with me this morning? We saw that process and product are next door neighbors. They go back and forth constantly. So I want to tell you a little story about why this is important, and then I'll introduce you to Sarah. So I mentioned that I was an artist in residence at Children's Hospital. This meant that I went 1 day a week to the National Medical Center in Washington, piano player and I, and we went all around the units. And we taught dance in the units, in the hallways, wherever we could find a group. We were helped by something called the child life workers. These are people who are not trained medical people, but they're there to help families. And in these classrooms, we would have, in these little classes, we'd have the kids, we'd have the parents, we'd get the nurses and the doctors sometimes. At that time, if I was to judge myself, and which I did all the time, but I would say that the standard for choreographers at that time in America was the following. Can you make movement that no one has ever seen? That is a great choreographer. Do you think that would be a really good standard to take into Children's Hospital? Oddly, I did see movement I'd never seen, because the kids are all wired up. You know, I mean, I saw amazing, amazing things, but actually, the commission was different. What the nurses and doctors and the families wanted. This is the dances they wanted me to make. Could I keep the kids moving for 30 minutes without hurting themselves? Could I give them 30 minutes where their body wasn't a problem, where actually their body was something amazing? Is it conceivable that their parents, who did not know what was happening with their children, could see their children for just a second, not as burden or not in hysteria and fear, but as this loving, incredible child they had seen? You can see that there's a whole different set of commissions for a postmodern choreographer than one I'd ever had. Very, very interesting. Here's the other thing. I spent 5 years at Children's Hospital, and we only gave one formal performance. Now, we gave lots of performances because the kids were performing, and there was never a class where the kids didn't perform for each other. What's that? You're saying something? I saw that little thing. Okay. I just want to say that I do think I was performing, but it wasn't in that conventional sense where people would come in and watch. So one day we had a show. The company came in, we were going to do 3 or 4 pieces from our repertory, we cleared out the atrium, they brought in everybody from the hospital. It was utterly fantastic. And in the front row was a bunch of the kids that I'd seen earlier in the week because I had class. And during one of the dances, it was a very quiet little dance, this child fell asleep. I was so upset. I don't know why. You know how that is? You know, everything's going well and then you focus on the one bad thing? I so focused on this kid. Why? You know. So even though it was an amazing day, as I was leaving going to the parking lot, I was really depressed. And this nurse came running after me and she said, Liz, thank you so much. We have been trying to get that child to go to sleep for 3 days. Is that amazing? My whole life, I thought the boundary that I was drawing, the dots I was connecting, I thought dance was supposed to wake you up. It never occurred to me that we had the skills to put people to sleep and that would be useful to somebody. That was life-changing for me. The reason I raise it in the context of process and product is I don't know where you put that on that spectrum. Yes, there was a product and there was a performance, but the process that emerged happened because I'd been there, I'd been thinking about this, I knew these people. So I want to say that I think we are living in a time where the process is getting more and more important, and where our survival depends partly on our capacity to share it. And those of us who teach and perform the teaching side of us, I know we're busy sharing our process, but we have to get good at it across the board. So I want to bring you now into at least one work I've made recently, and maybe 2 if we have time, and I hope that you're beginning to think of questions. And actually, in addition to questions, I just wonder if any pictures have come into your mind. Can I just stop for a second on that? Has anybody got any images that came to them while I've been talking? Have you noticed that you have some pictures coming up there? Do you know that we do, of course, have pictures every second? And it's one of the way artists capture what's important to them. Can anybody tell me what picture came up when I was talking about the hospital? What came into your mind? Anybody?
Healing and feeling good, happiness.
Did you have a particular picture where that was taking place?
I was in a hospital, or a studio hospital.
A studio hospital, you kind of combine the two? Yeah. Was it a hospital you've been in, or just you could morph them?
Yeah.
Anybody else have a picture? Yeah.
After spending time with years ago, I started working with senior citizens, and we were doing some work, and I wanted to find out stories of their background. We started, they were having fun, we were talking, they said, well, tell me about when you grew up. And they said, I suffered when I grew up, let's do other things.
Is that the picture that came to you? Oh, I'm
what
sorry.
it was this shift of you talking about what you were expecting.
So a personal experience came back to you. How about when I said the hospital? I'm really curious. How many of you have been in a hospital? Yeah. And can I ask you, if you look in your imagination, which hospital came in? Did you see those? Yeah, right there. What hospital came to you?
Children's Hospital.
Which one?
Children's Hospital.
Which children's?
Cincinnati.
What's that?
Cincinnati.
I can't hear.
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. That's the point. That's exactly the point. May I say, congratulations. You saw your hospital, not mine. You saw in your mind. And that's what we do with our imaginations. We make these links between big stories, like I'm telling you, and your own experience. This is really powerful. So I hope you keep that in mind. And later when I ask you if you have questions, the other thing I'm going to ask you is, do you have images? Because I'm just as interested in that. Okay, so 10 years ago I started working with scientists. I did a piece with geneticists. We're not going to go into that one. It was very interesting. I loved it. Had a great time. We toured the piece for 5 years. Very popular piece. It went all over the place. It was really interesting. Big multimedia thing. We were done. I wasn't doing any more science. And then we went to the University of Michigan. And the head of the physics department came up to me afterwards and he said, "We want one." I think that's funny. Don't you think that's funny? Think about that for a minute. We want one. You made one for the geneticists. Okay, we want one. I said, no, I'm done. He said, no, wait.
Yeah.
So we had a meeting. I got to meet the entire physics department at the University of Michigan. And here's the thing I want to tell you, dancers. When I went to the meeting, everybody was on time. The physicists were all there. And that got me interested. Like, maybe physicists and dancers have something in common. And it's about how you measure time, even though they measure time like infinitely, and we measure time like that. During that meeting, one of them said that, well, you know, they're experimenting over in Switzerland with that place where they're smashing the atoms, called CERN, and they're going to figure out the real beginning of the world, the real creation. And I said to them, well, what happens to all the other creation stories then? If science actually figures out exactly how we started, what's going to happen? Do you guys find that interesting? I do. I think it's interesting how science moves fast and we move slow, and how we synthesize these things. So I said, okay, maybe I'll go. And they sent me to CERN, and we put dancers in the tunnel. They didn't push the button, they disintegrated, but we got to be in there, and people just loved having the dancers around. I mean, the dancers were dancing in the tunnel. Everybody from all over the place came with their cell phones and everything. They just could not get enough of the dancers being in the tunnel. We ended up making a piece about how things begin in physics world, how things begin. There was actually a section taken from Genesis. And along the way, we just met so many interesting people. And I'll just say maybe one more thing about it. I decided in this piece that Act 1 would be in the theater like this. We would have a very interesting show, I hoped. And that Act 2 would be tea. And then you would go out and the audience would sit at tables, or in some cases we just quickly set the stage here. And at every table would be an artist and a scientist. And the dances would continue around the tables. And the audience could talk about what had happened to them. I'll just explain to you why tea. The United States made the first nuclear bomb in Los Alamos. Perhaps you know this. It's in the Southwest. When we went to the Southwest to create the bomb, and I was interested because, you know, the country put so much money into creating this thing. Talk about creation. The bomb was amazing creation. They canceled all of the businesses within 200 miles of the site, including there was a very famous boys' school. They shut it down. They shut down everything. But only one business was allowed to stay. It was a little tea house run by a woman named Edith Warner. And she was hired by Oppenheimer to feed the physicists once a week. It was a big deal to go down to her little pueblo and have dinner with her. She was extremely well known for her chocolate cake, and we had the recipe. So at tea, the host, we had one of the dancers be Edith Warner, because Edith Warner's dead now. But the audience got her chocolate cake, and you got to, and Edith kind of oversaw the whole thing, and that's how we set it up. So now I want you to meet Sarah Levitt, who is one of the most amazing dancers. I had the great pleasure of having her dance with me for a while. Here she is, and she's in that piece, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what that was like, because she's here in Ohio now.
So early on in the process of creating the matter of origins, Liz brought equations on paper to rehearsal, and she gave them to each of the dancers and asked us to make some solo material from it. And we didn't know what the equations meant, so we were really just responding to the groupings of lines and spaces on the page. And so we made this solo material, and then sometime later we were in residence at the University of Maryland, and Liz engaged some physicists from the school to come speak to us. So they came and they gave sort of mini lectures and answered our questions about the equations we'd received. And it turned out that I'd received the Heisenberg uncertainty principle as my equation. Does anybody know what the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is? So Very roughly, it states that if you know the position of an object, you can't know its speed. If you know the speed, you can't know its position. And I got really interested in this sort of conditional knowing, that you could know one thing but not the other. And starting from this broad place, I took it back to my own dancing, and I started to wonder, what do I know and not know as a dancer? And at that time, I felt I really knew speed, momentum, throwing myself around, releasing the weight of my body into the floor, getting up really quickly, and I didn't feel like I knew much about line and shape. And so I didn't make a movement that had like static lines and shape in it. So I made this solo, kind of putting together what I felt like I knew as a dancer and what I didn't know. And through the process of doing it, of course, as you know from going to rehearsals in class, you get better at the things that are unfamiliar to you. So I'm just going to show you a section of that solo now. I know this. It's not definitely anywhere. I know this. I know this. I don't know. At this point, another dancer would come, pick me up, and we'd go into a trio dealing with measurement. That's all.
So, Sarah, maybe just tell them a little bit about what happened for you over time in the process of that. And just...
So, like I said, that whole section about line, I didn't feel like I was a dancer that did that. I felt pretty strongly like, I don't really want to be near anything that resembles classical dance technique. I wanted to do something different than that. And I think through the process of doing this, and it was over a period of years that we worked on the piece and then performed it, I started to realize like, oh, I guess I can do things like that. I guess I don't have to classify myself as though I'm only this type of dancer. So it kind of opened me up to what else was possible for me in my dancing.
So I thought we could look at a couple clips. It's a little, Rodney up there is fantastic. It's a promo clip of the piece. So there are two things I need to tell you about it. First of all, it's not precisely the way the piece goes if you saw it in public. We have a voiceover. The voiceover is part of the dance, but it's not typically done at the part that you're seeing. But you're going to get a couple clips of Sarah. You'll see a tiny bit of what she just did. You're going to see there's a whole other section she had where flying off these chairs, which had to do with measurement and how they were thinking about measurement. And then you're also going to see her do this mad dash, which is one of my favorite things. When we were at CERN, we learned about one of the other equations, and the idea is that if a particle smashes against the wall enough times, it will eventually go through the wall. Yeah, I know, it's like, really? And I said, well, how come? Because we had been in the tunnel and we had these pictures, you're not going to see this, but of Ben throwing himself against the wall. And of course, he doesn't get through the wall. And the physicist said, well, it has to be tiny particles. So you'll see a little thing where Sarah kind of gets at that. And then there's a few little, we're going to jump around a little bit, you'll get a little feeling for the pizza. And then at the end, you'll see a little bit of tea. And you'll see our Edith Warner dancing with the head of the physics department from the University of Maryland. So we'll watch a little bit of this. Thank you, Rodney. Can you see okay?
What is the fundamental nature of gravity? What holds the universe together? Why should I bother? Is there a unified theory of everything? Are there other dimensions? Where do we come from? Where are we?
And indeed, welcome to CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva. Welcome to the CERN Control Center.
That's the tunnel we were in. And Rhonda, you're going to go through some of this, I think. Yeah, just move along. We're going to skip along a little bit. Keep going. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we can keep. They spend a little time in here. This is all Hubble pictures, you guys. This is Keith Thompson.
Part of our search
No, Keith.
with Hubble and CERN and in general in physics is about beginnings. We're interested in the beginning of the universe. We're interested in the beginning of the very first galaxies. We're interested in the beginning of stars and planets, in the beginning of life. All of those are things that fascinate us and actually fascinated human beings from the beginning of civilization.
In the beginning,
We'll go past this.
fire.
That's CERN though, you guys. More equations. Here we go. Here's T. There's our audience talking away about what they just saw. I think we'll just pause there. Yeah. That just gives you a little bit of a sense about how the piece worked. And Sarah and I will come back to that. Say that by the time we finished touring that work, the physicists were flying off the chairs too, which was really fun. Yeah, maybe I should let you see more, but I'm just conscious of time. So I want to take a few seconds to see if you have any questions or comments. Can we bring up their lights too, so you can see them? Thank you. While we have Sarah here, any thoughts, questions on your mind, or images?
When was this done again?
This Origins, 2010 through 2012, 13, something like that. how did the scientists respond to the dancing? I just want to say the scientists wanted to dance more. So they came in, they wanted to give us, direction, but then they really, same with the geneticists, and in the genetics piece, they're much more evident. They're on the screen a lot, but yeah, they all want to. They're really excited to get involved. They have a lot in common with them, and it's interesting to spend time together. Of course, we're only targeting scientists who want to interact with us. We're not targeting the ones who slam the doors and are down the hall. Yeah, Lauren.
Has your work gone into the schools with this configuration of scientists and artists, or has it only been as adults?
No, we've done, I would say, particularly with the genetics piece, there's an interesting, if you're interested, here's a story that has something to do with the economics of our field. When we do big pieces like this, you see how big this is. Multimedia, sound design, 8 or 10 performers, huge projectors. It's really expensive. We build partnerships in different cities. So we get people to collaborate all across the country. And each city and each place takes on a different aspect of the problem that we want to solve. So we spend time with people in those communities. In Flint, Michigan, they have, this is now about genetics, but they have a heritage farm where they're trying to save apples, tomatoes, because the genetics are changing and we're losing so many of our species. So they brought us out, we spent a lot of time, we did a lot of beautiful film work there, and the PBS station did all the film for us for that section. But we worked with a group of slam poets that were going into the school, and we wanted to build something about genetics with them. So I brought in some ideas about Charles Darwin. Do you guys know who Darwin is? Yeah? Darwin, amazing, amazing, amazing man who helped us understand how evolution works. Every artist does what he talks about because we are constantly evolving. So I was working with a group of slam poets who are predominantly African American, and I brought in the idea of working with Darwin. Now, I want everybody to listen to this. White people, I really need you to pay attention to this. Because this has to do with what's going on in our country, so listen. They were really upset about having to work with Darwin. Because for people in the African American community, if you mention genetics, what they think about are all the experiments that have been done on them in the name of science without their knowledge. In other words, we have used people who might be poor or might not be aware and put them through experiments. There's a big story right now about what we did in Latin America from Johns Hopkins University. So the trickle down from that, even though that happened 50 years ago, 75 years ago, is that these beautiful poets didn't want to do Darwin. Is that interesting? I think it's incredible. And artists, what do you think we should do in a situation like that? Is it our job? Should we just go back out and make our dances? Right? What's our job? So we got really involved. We brought in African American scientists. We brought in all kinds of people to talk about this. The upshot is that they made the most glorious poems about genetics that they took into the schools and had the kids write them. That's the upshot. Because, Darwin isn't a white person's thing. Darwin belongs to everybody. But if history is so painful that some people think Darwin isn't theirs, that's not right. That's not right. So I think it's kind of our task to take on some of those things and to think about it. So yes, we went into the schools. That's kind of a heavy story to tell, but nonetheless. Good. Anybody else, a question or a comment or anything? Including if you want to talk to me more about what we just talked about. Okay. Then shall I tell you a few more stories? I will. Sarah, thank you. If you do this, it doesn't mean you have to take on the world every second. There are times when you just go, I just want to make a pretty dance. I just want to perform. It's fine. But what's beautiful about doing this horizontal thing, is that you also can take time to think about what your place is. My husband's a piece about Abraham Lincoln for the Ford's Theater, which is where Lincoln got shot. And I went to see the show, and I was backstage talking to the people who run the Ford's Theater. And they said that the entire city of Washington was getting ready to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, which I had not been aware was happening. So I got interested because I like thinking about things like that. And I had this image. Remember when I said to you, you have pictures in your mind every second? Well, I had an instantaneous picture. The backstage of Lincoln Theater is nothing but tiny little rooms. It's like these little warrens. It's way different, just like little tiny. And in my mind, they were filled with women. For some reason, I saw women dancers doing solos, all about the Civil War, all doing something new and different. I thought that was really interesting, so I said, I should pursue that. So I started looking at what happened to women during the Civil War, and guess what? Women, at least 400 of us dressed as men and went into the war as soldiers. They all had physicals. So you try to think about how that worked. The best answer I have gotten to that question is the following. In those days, boys wore pants, girls wore dresses, so if somebody had on pants, they had to be a boy. This on the day that we've got the Bruce Jenner interview, so I guess the world is like really changed. I mean, it's just so amazing that our perception works like that, right? They wouldn't, so I don't know, I got very interested in that. And when I pursued this, I found out in addition to the women that dressed as men, there were also the beginning of nursing. This was only the Second War in which there were nurses. So I went to a museum called the Civil War Medical Museum that's not far from about an hour and a half from my house. And I went into a room, and the room was entirely photographs of people from the Civil War with amputations. That was what they did. That's the war where all that happened. So if you imagine how many thousands of people came out of that war with amputations, then the streets are full of amputees. It made me make a link to what? If you walked into that room and you saw those, what would you link to today? Would you think about our wars? Wouldn't you? We have so many people coming home without limbs. So this, I guess what I want you to understand, everybody, is like this is an artist's life. This is the life. You make connections when other people don't make them. You just do. And then you say, I need to pursue this. I need to think about this. So I started thinking I should make it be about our current wars, and maybe I should make it be about the people who were actually doing the amputations, meaning the nurses and the doctors, and maybe I should make it be about what happens when people come home. And I started working on this 5 years ago. Now, we have almost every day a story in the paper what it's like for our veterans when they come home, but oddly enough, when we started the piece, there was hardly any of that. So it was actually difficult to get information, but what I didn't realize is that I thought in the Civil War, since everybody was in the war, what happened when they came home was easy. It wasn't. The research said something entirely differently. So we went about making the piece. Maybe the film actor Bill Pullman, who played the president in Independence Day, he's in the piece. And his wife Tamara, who you saw dancing with the physicists. So we had this amazing cast. And then I decided we really needed a veteran. So we spent some time with a veteran. We worked with several veterans, and so they're in the piece, and they're amputees. We collected lots and lots of stories, and I guess the thing I want to report to you is that, do you think we'll be at war for a long time? Do you think?
Yes.
I do. It came up today in class, in the composition class. Someone was talking about it. I asked people to think of something in the news that's on the move, and someone said ISIS. So somebody made a really interesting connection. And then remember we make dances to understand what we can't understand? Then we went to work on that. If you are at all interested in physicality and in touch, and in what happens when you share weight, and what happens when you try to work with another body, you have a world in front of you of people coming home from war. You have all their families. you have all of our neighborhoods where we're not talking to each other. I promise you, just as I said earlier, the art science thing is in front of you. I'm telling you, if you're interested, please talk to me about it, but there's a universe of work to be done, and many, many, many artists spending time with veterans now. The military is so disturbed about what's happening when they come home that they're actually employing artists. So if you're interested in a job, there may be one for you. Okay, so now I am in class. See if you want to know anything more. Ask some questions before I read one little thing from my book. Can I ask you, are you interested in this?
Yeah.
Do you feel inspired? I want you to. I want you to see. Remember the dots? The veterans are dots. The hospitals are dots. Ballerinas are dots. We're all just dots. But you can draw the lines. And you can take this incredible knowledge that you have and make something amazing for yourselves, for your families, for the stage, for the critics, for everything that is important in the art world, and also for this other world that is in need. Okay, now I'm going to read you. You sure? Last chance. Okay. So I wrote a book called Hiking the Horizontal. You know where that comes from now, because what's the gesture? Yes. You don't have to read the book. You have it. You got it. All right. So, there's a section in the book about family. And when you write a book, one of the things that this publisher does is they send the book out to people to review it, and then you get feedback. And I got feedback from some of the reviewers that said, take out everything about the family, it's not professional. Are you shocked? You should be. You should be shocked. That is like not fair. And you know what's interesting? So when I, thank you for laughing. Thanks for laughing up there. When I get comments from people, it almost always starts with a section on the family, especially from women wondering about having children. I have a daughter. But this is not about her, although there are things in here about her. Sorry, I think I have it marked. Okay, here it is. It's called Bulky Love. I am going to try to explain yet again why some of us love movement. I want to try to make it clear that it has value, even though it's hard to measure. I want to make it impossible to be dismissed ever again. I am so sick and tired of people calling the work that my colleagues and I do touchy-feely, as if something were wrong with touching and feeling. Actually, I don't think they really mean that touching and feeling are bad. I think they are using this put-down as something much worse. They are saying that this thing we do has no intellectual value, and therefore it is a waste of their time. That's why I'm always saying, let the rigor show. But lately I've come up with some new language about this casual but very powerful confrontation that occurs. It introduces another way to remind people of the value of things we cannot accommodate with our minds alone. I call it bulky love, and it is how our golden retriever lives in the world. Love, or something akin to it, absorbs our dog completely. It emanates from her toward most living and non-living things except for white plastic bags, which for some reason terrify her. She greets all and everything with such openness and curiosity that she brings out the same qualities in others. In fact, when Anna, that's my daughter, was younger, we often told her, be like Nani, as she went off into new situations. The next time someone challenges me about why dancing matters, or why the experience of art matters, I'm going to ask them if they have or have ever had a pet. And then I'm going to ask them to describe the experience. I know it's hard to put into words, We cannot explain why we spend hours of our days and nights talking to our animals even though they can't quite understand us, making sure that they're comfortable even though they can figure that out for themselves. There's no rational reason to spend large amounts of money on their health and upkeep, but we keep doing it. Now there's research that shows kids score better on tests if they read to their cat or bird, and that the elderly feel more connected if visited by someone with a dog. That's good, but it isn't the reason we keep our animals. There's something much more, and words and statistics cannot account for the experience. And that's what happens with dancers when they move. It's almost impossible. The nature of it is almost impossible to name. The accounting of time and money and intensity is not measurable. We do it and we share it, whether there is an identifiable need or not. I hope you're hearing that, because after all I've been talking about today, all the need, all the work that's out there, I hope you're hearing that this isn't about that. The accounting of time and money and intensity is not measurable. We do it and we share it, whether there is an identifiable need or not. But it's real and total and worth it. And just like our relationship to animals, it is steeped in ancient history and thousands of years of experience. It's wrapped tightly in our DNA, and we would not call ourselves human if we let go of it. And that, my friends, is the end. Thank you.